Well, good morning and good afternoon to those of you out east. My name's Noah Praetz. I'm the president co-founder of the Elections Group. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, the Elections Group partners with state and local officials to implement new programs, improve processes for voters and stakeholders, providing guidance, resources, management support. Our team is made up of all former election officials from across the United States. And we are very pleased to have you all with us today for election officials as CEOs. So today's webinar, it's going to explore the following analogy: how running elections is similar to running a business. You know, at the helm of both industries, we have leaders who share great responsibility, navigate ever-changing landscape, particularly in elections. It's been extra dynamic over the last 4 years. But at the core is always delivering to the consumer. In our case, that's voters, campaigns, candidates, other stakeholders. And so due to these responsibilities, running organizations, election officials are often likened to CEOs. So running a small business or an election office or running a large one have many similarities and many differences. But the fundamental responsibilities are the same, even though they're executed very differently depending on the size of staff, rules, regulations, laws, the sort of environment that we're all operating in. So I'll share that I come from Cook County, Illinois, probably the second largest election jurisdiction in the country. A handful of super huge ones around the country. Now, I started really low in the ranks, worked my way up, did most of the jobs. But by the time I had the helm, the CEO job, I had a cadre of highly competent professionals with long track records, and I had to manage them. Unlike small offices, I didn't have to do everything myself. More importantly, even if I could, I realized quickly and the hard way that when I wanted it Noah's way, when I wanted it just so, and I pushed on that quickly crushed the joy and ownership from my team. I mean, I could watch their hours, their faces sag, and I realized, man, running this organization isn't like running elections, dotting I's, dotting T's. I'm building a community, an environment. And so we think about our responsibilities and we mature and we grow. So today I can share a few perspectives. Mostly I'll shut up. You know, I had a huge shop, 100 plus employees, 20 million plus budget, 1.5 million voters. But with us are Carly and Jamie and Nathan, come from across the spectrum. Okay, Jamie Shue is a county clerk in Douglas County, Kansas. You'll hear from him in a minute. Carly Kappas, the county clerk and recorder in Weld County, Colorado, and Nathan Jaramillo, the Bureau of Elections Administrator in Bernalillo County, New Mexico. So we're going to dig into some of the things, but each of us, from the smaller counties to the biggers, all had to be CEOs, and we were accountable for really kind of 5 major buckets of responsibility: governance, risk management, communications, election management, and funding and budgeting. And so when we think about governance, you know, these priorities shift over time based on the election calendar or what's in the news. But when it comes to governance, each of us had to create and implement a vision or a mission for our organization, build long and short-term strategies, set strategic goals to make sure they're, you know, measurable. Risk management has been a big focus lately as we think about cyber, public health, pandemics. Okay, and we need to make sure we're paying attention to that, monitoring them, minimizing them, shifting risks as the sort of ecosystem changes. Communications, this has been really ascendant over the last 4 years. For a long time, at least the external communications, a lot of election officials sort of stay below the radar, stay quiet, let everything happen around them. But when the attacks come on the institution itself, election officials, these guys have had to step up and put out information into the ecosystem and think about like sharing the values of democracy, you know, on behalf of the organization, on behalf of the country and the state themselves. Management and compliance, that's our hardest stuff, but this is running elections with integrity. And then the administrative side, right? Legal, human resources, and finally fundraising. getting elections right costs a lot of money. We're all resource constrained. Some of us have more luck than others. But you got three of the best here, all former colleagues, current heroes of mine, staying in the game, doing it right for their voters. So I'd love to turn to each of you guys just briefly to tell us a little bit about you. In the order of size of jurisdiction, Jamie, I want to turn it to you first. Douglas County, Kansas.
All right, thank you for having me here. So my name is Jamie Shue. I've been the county clerk. I was elected in 2004. So somewhere along the way, I've become one of the old people. So I've been serving since 2005. Douglas County is right outside of Kansas City. We are the home of the University of Kansas, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, but also Haskell Indian Nations University, which is one of two Bureau of Interior universities. We also have a small Baker University. We're at about 80,000 registered voters. We're truly a university town with a lot of commuters. As you know, at 80,000, I know I seem very small. I'm actually the fifth largest in the state of Kansas. We have 105 counties, and the majority of the counties have 2,000 to 5,000 registered voters. In fact, over 50% of our population lives in 5 of our counties. So one of the things is I'm a county clerk, and so I not only have elections, but I also have accounts payable, payroll, kind of a general government side in addition to elections. And we'll get into that. When you talk about being a CEO, it's kind of like, I know Carly's the same way too. You kind of have different divisions that you're also handling at the same time. So I look forward to this conversation, and that's kind of a little bit of who we are.
That's great. Thanks, Jamie. Well, Carly, I think you're next. Weld County, Colorado.
Well, good morning and afternoon, everybody, depending on where you are watching from. I am Carla Koppas, and I'm the elected clerk and recorder here in Weld County. I am also, like Jamie, I was elected in 2004, and so I'm in my 10th year in my third term as clerk and recorder. And just like Noah, prior to me becoming elected, I actually worked in the clerk and recorder's office, primarily in elections, going from frontline all the way up to right underneath the manager, and then decided, well, why the heck not? Let me just become the clerk. And so since my span of 20 years in elections, we have grown from 2004 being about 90,000 registered voters, now up to 250. So that's been a huge dynamic change for us in the operations of how we administer elections here in Will County. But also Colorado is very forefront and pretty pushing the boundary all the time with election models to try and make it to where we're meeting the voters. So we've been a part of that conversation for a long time. We also have the University of Northern Colorado here, but we have a very strong foundational Ames Community College. So similar to Jamie, we also kind of have that college town feel. We are one of the large 10 counties in Colorado, but I very much function like a medium and small county because I only actually have a staff of 7. And so we have a lot of responsibilities. We have a culture that is everybody needs to know what everybody else does so we can be a team. And because at the end of the day, election day, we can't move it. So we have to make sure that we are ready and prepared. And if a teammate goes down, we're there to support them and help them go over everything. So that's really kind of what we have been doing here in Will County in Colorado. We've done a lot of model changes. When I first started, we were precinct votes. Now we are now a mail ballot / in person. So we've done a lot of changing on how we do administer elections here, but I'm really proud of all the work that myself and my team have done over the last 20 years that we have been in Weld County administering elections.
So for those of y'all are in elections, if you cannot go to a conference or hear anybody from Colorado ever take a microphone without bragging on, we're the best. The Colorado model is what you all should follow. They've got this brand loyalty to the state and the model. I think part of that's because it was driven not by the legislatures. It was the county clerks getting together saying this is right for our voters, our stakeholders, for us as administrators. But I'm so glad that you threw that out there. I mean, personally tired of it, but I'm glad for everybody else to hear it.
We are Colorado.
That's right. That's right. All right, Nathan. Tell us about you, Bernalillo County.
Hello, everybody, and good job saying Bernalillo County, Noah. I appreciate that. You did a great job. I'm Nathan Jaramillo. I am the Bureau of Elections Administrator here in Bernalillo County. I am a permanent government employee, so I am not somebody who's elected or appointed. And underneath me, there's an internal infrastructure that is set in place for an elected official, which is the county clerk, to come in and I work in conjunction with that individual, whoever is elected. For kind of a good base for when they come in, we have that infrastructure. Bernalillo County is the largest county in New Mexico. We have approximately 450,000 registered voters here, and we're very dynamic as well. We have the University of New Mexico within our county. We also have a large community college called Central New Mexico College, which is primarily here. In conjunction with that, we also have tribal lands that we deal with, and so that's a specialty area that we highly focus on in conjunction with the Department of Justice. In addition to that, we just have all of the constituents here in Bernalillo County that we report to. We have 72 voting convenience centers on election day and 21 early voting locations. And we're a voting convenience center county in that, not precinct based, anybody can vote anywhere at any of those sites. So there's some interesting dynamics to contend with that being said. And we are responsible for not only the statewide elections here in the Bernalillo County, but also all of the municipal elections and entity elections as well. And so I'm excited to be here and speak with you all.
That's awesome. Nathan, you and I probably have closer job experience as being permanent staff with an elected above us, right? So oftentimes the elected will step out and take so many of those external communications slings and arrows, which can be a great buffer for protecting the permanent elections crew. Carly, Jamie, you guys are both elected officials, so you got to navigate that space. But then also flip hats and be an administrator. Easier in a non-election year for you than it is in an election year. I guess I started out here, and Carly, throw it to you first, but everybody feel free to riff on it, or we'll hit Ichi on it. But post 2020, the dynamics of running elections with a very confused or frustrated electorate has put a lot of pressure on folks. You guys have stayed in the game, which is great. I want to think. Talk to us about some of your biggest challenges you face in carrying out your duties. We talked about, you got fundraising, you got actually the nuts and bolts of the election, you got communications, setting a tone for your place. Where are your challenges lie right now since those shift, and what have you done to really overcome them? So Carly first, please.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest challenges, obviously, that communications piece, getting the correct information out there when we all have our collective kind of microphones that we have, but they are struggling to match the size of some of the other microphones that are now playing in this space. And so that's been one of the biggest challenges, trying to make sure that the correct information is getting out there. I have spent thousands of hours, I mean, literal thousands of hours, having meetings, having phone calls, going and speaking to groups that have that frustration, have that concern, have those misconceptions of that, now I kind of called it recycled false narratives, essentially, because we're kind of getting regurgitation back to where it was a couple years ago. That has definitely been a huge, big challenge. Another big challenge is making sure that, again, I do feel as the elected that it is my responsibility to protect my staff from all of that, to make sure that it's my name in people's mouths and not their name. So that's been another thing that I have done to try and combat and make sure that my team can stay focused on the basic functions of our job, which is to put on a successful election and to allow every single voter to feel confident and safe that their vote is being cast and heard correctly. That's what I want my team to focus on. So we've been doing kind of a divide and conquer a little bit, where I've been the one that has been kind of taking in those arrows that are being flung at us as much as possible. So again, we can continue to stand in front of my people and say, nope, I know that my team behind me is doing this successfully. They are careers, they are professionals, they know what they're doing. That part of that communication has definitely been a huge challenge since 2020. Another thing is,
no, I mean, I just want to hear those thousands of hours you spent sort of retail communicating. like
Mhm.
direct to consumer. This is how elections work in Weld and Colorado. This is why it's trustworthy. I want to, tease that out a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I've been taking one-on-one meetings for a long time. I've had a lot of phone calls, but really what I've been primarily trying to do is go out into the public, meet the people where they're comfortable at, and then have those conversations with them. We have beefed up our website with more information and links to other things that can, back up what I'm saying. Because again, I can speak all day long about it, but they're still going to be like, yeah, well, you're maybe just trying to sell me some goods. But that's why I also, that's why I also encourage them to actually come in and be election judges, come and watch my elections. Or, you know what, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, come take a tour during a live election and I will show you anything and everything. Kind of towards Jamie, I am not the Wizard of Oz. I don't have a curtain. There's no curtain that I'm pulling the strings behind. So again, allowing them to come in and really have that confidence and build it. Because I feel as if I can get a couple of those people, just a handful, then they can help spread my message. And so building those relationships, building that network even stronger has really been beneficial, but it has been a lot of hours that I've had to try and find in my normal everyday job time. I mean, as JB alluded to, I've got 2 other departments that are very public facing as well outside of elections. So trying to find that time, there's been a lot of hours, a lot of 14, 16-hour days to try and be successful as much as we can in that communication aspect of it. But I really feel going into this year, it is going to be a good foundation I can call on to these people who I have taken from people who have frustrations and confusion and questions and have actually made them to become an ally and outside additional support for us.
I love that you've got some conversion stories. That's pretty exciting. I mean, to me, it's not like your CEO hat. You've sort of, from a risk management perspective, you recognize like, hey, this is the biggest challenge, existential, facing our organization. I'm going to move like my efforts into that comm space. Staff, I need you to step up and fill the gap. I'll try to insulate you a little bit. And you got some victories out of it. That's awesome. Jamie,
Yeah.
what about you, man?
Survival is about our biggest. You touched on this. I think changing that attitude for those of us who worked in elections, it was keep your head down, do your job. I used to say if the next day after election it's who won, who lost, and not how the votes were counted, we were good. But I think we've had to become kind of like Carly. We've got to be promoters of our office. And that feels weird for us in a way, like becoming permanent PR people and really, but we've got to get in front of that narrative. For me, here in Kansas, our legislature has also been one that we're trying to also work on that narrative because they haven't necessarily been the best partners over the past few years, especially with some of the conspiracy theories and so forth. So, you're kind of not just dealing with the public, but dealing with the legislature that's passing and talking about passing a bunch of laws. Well, the Senate on the floor just passed, we would hand count everything. You're like, well, that just is not possible. And I think changing, you were talking about being a CEO. I think a good CEO is constantly adapting. I am very task-oriented, process-oriented. I'm probably not the best personal development person. I could maybe be, especially when we're in the middle of an election, maybe I could be considered a little cold because we're dealing on tasks. And I've had to change that because suddenly over the past few years, it's really been about mental health. How is my staff doing? How am I doing? How are my peers doing? We have so many brand new county clerks. Suddenly I've become a champion of how is your mental health balance? We used to just work until we dropped. That doesn't work anymore in order to kind of stay in the ball game. And so I've had to adapt my style a little bit to be a little more, I refer to it as touchy-feely, but it's more of being healthier, both as a boss, but with my staff.
Yeah, no, that's great adaptation. You guys that are the election, like the electeds, you face it in ways. I mean, on the one hand, you put yourselves out there, so you sort of knew what was what was possible. So you came in with a tough jaw, thick skin. On the other hand, like you see these things coming at your staff, and you realize you've got to create a protective blanket around them, and it's great to hear you guys are doing that. Now, Nathan, you've got a elected above you, which takes some of that, but you're the permanent sort of infrastructure that keeps this running, and those barbs come down at the staff level. Now, tell me again, like your biggest challenges carrying out your duties, and then how you're overcoming those.
Sure, and it's going to be a consistent theme in terms of communication. That's going to be a challenge across the board to any level or jurisdiction size. Communication on various levels. We employ close to 700 to upwards of 1,200 election board members based on the size and scope of an election. We have 35 permanent staff members in our office, but then we grow exponentially during the election cycle. We actually hire for this particular primary 56 temporary employees as well. So a lot of communication to them, communication to the election board, and then communication to the constituents of Bernalillo County, that public perception. And I like to say this, and it's kind of funny, but it's true in a way. When things go well, the clerk is out there on the news, getting the message out. When things go wrong, from a technical aspect, I'm the one there on the news, unfortunately, having to dive into the details and explain what transpired there. And that's okay. That comes with the territory of my position. But like Carly and Jamie both said, protecting the individuals below us, letting them know, highlighting that they do a great job. We recently just got the status. I don't know if you guys saw this on the news, but New Mexico being the #1 election rated election processes here in the country. It was just on the news recently, and we take pride in that. And Bernalillo County being the largest county, I want to let the staff know, hey, you guys are a big part of that for New Mexico. You guys are a great job. So highlighting what they do communication wise, like Jamie said, sometimes I can get a little bit, I'm not a touchy-feely guy either, and there are staff here that do a great job. And I'm a proponent of them when they have ideas for morale boosters. I'll guns blazing on that. Not necessarily me being the person that can drive that, but encouraging the individuals that have that passion for that to do that. So there's communication in a variety of ways. One, for the morale, that's recently. Two, making sure a consistent message is going across the board on direction on what needs to be done. With that many moving parts, it's easy for people to get miscommunicated and cause issues of overlapping projects and arguments, which, as we all know in elections, as we move closer to election day, we're here more and more, and we become like family, and skin gets thinner and thinner to the election day. And I can see it on people. And so I let people know, hey, our skin's going to get thin. At the end of the day, we're like family. We're here. Let's find a resolution. Let's sit down and talk about it. Let's communicate. And at the end of the day, we all want to do good. We're all passionate about this election process, which is why we're here. It's not for anything else other than because we're passionate about elections. So let's find a resolution. Let's work together. And there's nothing better than seeing when all of those plans laid to rest, we've communicated, everything's done and completed, the excitement everybody has in our office that, we did a good job, we completed it, we communicated, and everything was successful in the end of the day. And that goes to the election board, our poll officials, election board, whatever you call them, and then also for the constituent of Bernalillo County when they're appreciative of the work that we do as well. And we really try to push all of that in that communication aspect.
I appreciate the sort of governance aspect of it. You guys have all touched on it, but sort of creating a culture within your organizations that was mutually supportive, right? Also sort of recognizing the needs to adapt your approach to support people's wellness, acknowledge your weaknesses. Jamie said he was the thin-skinned guy during elections. So that's good. I also heard the little New Mexico, Colorado, bragging. You all might have to compete for #1 here. Jamie, you got to throw out something great about Kansas at some point.
I mean, we were #3 in that report. So, I mean, we're not too far from taking that back over.
Jamie, do you know where you were?
I think like 28th or 29th.
Attaboy.
But we rose like a couple spots. So,
Hey, man.
progress.
Yay!
Hey, but
Trajectory is
Kansas
everything. I don't even
basketball
know
is
where
always
Illinois
ranked within the
was.
top.
Exactly.
Well, congratulations to all of you for positive movement or a good current standing. So I'm interested right now in like how you sort of manage your team. By the time I had taken over, I knew a little bit about, or a lot about everything, but sort of not about managing a team, right? Where 10 managers, each of them with like a specific set of duties. And I remember having meetings where following suit on my predecessors, where we go around the horn and managers would tell us what they're doing. And I'm listening for what are they not doing? So that drove us to build a giant calendar of every event. I've had each of them create their own Google Calendar with every deadline. So we were working off of kind of a mastered list of everything that's supposed to be done. One, so I could help hold them accountable. They could hold themselves accountable. Do you guys, and so that was just a stupid, cheap, like in free tech tool that we use to drive management. And for those of you listening, right now, we've got a sample calendar on our website that you can download in Excel with like 200 plus known tasks and elections and like where we think they fall on the calendar that can be helpful for you. But not thinking about calendaring exactly, but have you adapted and developed any cool tools to manage your thing? Nathan, I'm going to turn to you first because it feels most similar, right? I would bring in hundreds of temp employees too and work 3 shifts across multiple sites and training thousands. And so without tools, I couldn't even wrap my head around it. Do you have any good success stories there, Nathan?
Yes, I do. A couple of things come to mind. So prior to working elections, I came from the private sector, which had a lot of staff as well. Coming in I had some preconceived ideas on how elections was going to be ran. And like I started meeting with all of my supervisors, coordinators, and managers. And some of them would bring me a stack of statutes or laws and all the things that they do. And my head was spinning. I'm not gonna lie to you, I was a bit overwhelmed because I didn't understand the challenges I was getting into when I first came in. In the private sector, we had applications and time management charts that were already completed before I even came in. But this is something I hit from scratch, and I had to catch up on everything very, very quickly. So I implemented a few things, like a Gantt chart. For those was helpful to build back. So, okay, election day is this day, everything that needs to be due, and then branch off into every department and their specific projects as well. From there, I utilized Microsoft projects. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that or not, and that would be assigned to the specific departments too, so that they could see what is coming up ahead as well. And something that I also found success in is coming with a different vantage point. From the private sector, I'd ask questions like, why are we doing it this way? And the general response was, well, that's just kind of how we've always done it.
We always did it.
Yeah. And I said, if we did it this way, wouldn't it save hours? And like, oh, come to think of it, yeah, and so we would really dive into those specific projects and see where there was a lot of inefficiency or redundancies just based on advancement of technology. I mean, we're talking about processes that were done for 25, 30 years straight, where I'm like, well, we could probably scan all of those documents in. And I realized this because one coordinator requested an additional filing cabinet when I came in. And I said, an additional filing cabinet? And I said, you have a huge one in your office already. Oh yeah, that one's full. I need another one. And what they're doing is they were manually evaluating every single poll official and keeping records of each one. And then so as it grew, they just kept that expanding and expanding. So we purchased applications. Yes, it costs more money on the front end for like a database, but I mean, we got rid of the filing cabinets. We scanned everything in. It's all tangible. If somebody were to leave or the building caught fire, it's not stored that way, and it saved us a lot of time. But those Gantt charts and Microsoft projects really helped me understand and identify the bigger picture in our office and how everything came together.
To me, that's exciting. We're worried a lot in our community about turnover, loss of muscle memory. but they're actually good opportunities when fresh eyes come in, bringing tools and new perspectives to things. But for Carly, like you and I both started at the bottom rung, right? I was typing for $7 an hour voter registrations. You came in, and you learned almost every job in the place, right? How to do it well. So you end up at a place with a lot of muscle memory. But I imagine when you transformed and you did the Colorado model, should be a drinking game, right? Every time you hear it at a conference, the Colorado model, like, how did that require you to change your approach or your set to like documentation or SOPs or tool deployment?
Oh yeah, and we had a lot. We were we were the second county in the nation to go from precinct to vote center. So we kind of had a little bit of a leg up from some of the other counties when we did change our election model in 2013. But we really did have to go through and really look at, okay, how are we going to communicate this? But really, how are we now going to utilize what we have internally and repurpose it and see if we need to go and purchase other things? What else is out currently in the market that, could slim it down? One of our biggest things for me, even as an employee, but even so as the elected, is how simple can I make this? The KISS method. Keep it simple, everybody. Trying to, again, make sure that we're doing the fundamentals of our elections well. And so what we did is we went through every single form, and we still do this even today. After every election, I kind of have a meeting that is the good, the bad, the ugly of the election. And we have our staff come in and we say, okay, what do you think you did really excellent and really well this election? What do you think you did really good? And maybe what are some things that we may need to like look at and think about? And that's going for like every single aspect of the job. How we handle phone calls. We have a phone tree. Is that phone tree still working? Do we need to revamp that phone tree? If we have a spreadsheet that we have all of our phone calls documented. So we go back and look, what was something that the voters were calling in? Was there confusion on ballot layout? Was there confusion on the instructions? I mean, we deep dive after every single election into those type of conversations. Was our judges manual really well? Because that was one thing that we had to majorly overhaul was our election judges, taking them from precinct mind now into kind of a vote center all in person model where any voter in the county can come and see you. That was a big shift in our election judges, especially for our veterans. So again, going through our election judges manual after every single election, making tweaks, making tunes, that's just kind of a part of our culture and what we're doing. We utilize the calendar as well. We have the state election calendar that the Secretary of State's office puts out. We walk through that. We tie it into our procedural manual that we work on every year as well. That's one thing that we have been developing over the last 5 years is like, if somebody were to come in and they needed to do your job, have you written it out well enough and tied it to the statutes and the laws and the rules to give people that why? I think a lot of the thing, kind of going back to what Nathan was saying, there wasn't a lot of why left in some of these procedures. And so getting back down to that why, tying it back to the obviously fundamentals of the law and the rules that are required, but then also coordinating and connecting with the fellow offices of other clerk and recorders. I know that we've got Lori Mitchell on here as a viewer right now. She is phenomenal in being creative and just bringing an outside view of her past careers into the sphere. I thoroughly enjoy having conversations with her along with some other of the clerk and recorders. And so not only were we doing it internally, but reaching out and building the network within Colorado to, beg and steal and redevelop as much as we possibly could. And that's just been something that's been so super helpful. We have 2 conferences every year with the association. We bring things up every time to continue to have the conversation, bring new ideas in. As you were saying, I've been in this in 20 years, but I absolutely love it when I bring in a new staff. I've got 2 people on the staff that have never been through presidential. And we are like, okay, how can I best prep you? But tell me, like, how are you're feeling and your views on this, your fresh eyes? Because I've been in the nitty gritty for a long time. I love to have that new perspective. So bringing
Zoom out
them
a
in.
little, yeah.
Yeah, and bringing them in and having them look at it. And again, that's a part of just that constant tweaking and tweaking and tweaking that has been so fundamentally valuable here in Weld County. But I think the state of Colorado too, is that we're always willing to say, okay, we're good, but how can we be better?
Look at, they're humble too.
We're so
Number
humble.
3, the best and humble. Like that's
Yeah,
great.
I think
Hey,
Powerhouse,
Jamie.
man.
I love it. Jamie and Nathan, do both of you guys have the Festivus party right after the election where you debrief everything and get all of the staff just dumping everything? I mean, it's a good thing to do, but it can be pretty humbling because a lot of that comes. I took them all as personal management failures, which is fine. Like I felt like CEOs, we got to figure out, okay, how do I solve on these problems for next time? But I had to create, like I did it always 2 weeks after, not too soon because everybody's thin skins and feelings were too fresh. I wanted to give them a little bit of time to like soften
Elect
their
themselves. Yeah.
challenges, but you don't want it to go too far away where they forget about it. Jamie, so
Yeah.
you came in like, you're a grizzly old timer. I see the gray in the beard, tell me what it was like, because you didn't come in with a lot of election experience. What was it like stepping in those first days and then like deciding how you're going to transform your office?
Yeah, well, I think if I can remember back that far, yeah, I came from higher ed and business management. I did not come from the office. So there was already, that was an interesting transition just because I didn't come from inside the office. So therefore there was skepticism of me. I'd actually run against the deputy and she's now my chief deputy. So yeah, it's worked out on the government side. She didn't want to do elections anymore. That was a huge learning curve. And, elections, I had been in politics, so I thought I knew what elections was, which I think is sometimes a failure with like the legislature and stuff. Just because you've run for office doesn't mean you know how to actually run an election. So it was a huge learning curve. And, the real estate side was a huge one for me also. But a lot of the same principles on business management, and especially I came from the customer service side, I was able to implement with the staff to kind of take. One thing we dealt with was this attitude of overcoming that we're government. And so there was all these territorial battles in the courthouse, but also how you dealt with citizens. Sometimes, especially long-term employees start to see citizens as a problem or an annoyance because they're trying to do their job and then a citizen wants something. And I had to talk about, well, they're the reason we're here, right? Not the spreadsheet you're working on. So I was able to implement a lot of that stuff. But, one of the things you touched on, I think you have to check your ego at the door as the manager of all of this. I just hired I have a new deputy of elections. He's been on for about a year and he's stayed on. So, but he has a ton of tech. Tech has kind of passed me by, right? It's been 20 years. He's used Power Automate in order to really make us more efficient, implemented Teams. And I would get frustrated with Teams because I didn't understand it. Implemented Slack. We use Slack for all of our poll worker communications.
Oh, that's
I didn't think it would work. It's been fantastic. And I've had to make, you have to stop yourself from saying, well, that's not going to work, right? Because I've been here for 20 years. So you have to trust that the newness. But the biggest thing I think also, and especially right now in elections where there's no mistake that's allowed, right? If you have a mistake, it's front page news. But Nathan mentioned it. There's so many moving pieces and parts. It's never going to go perfect. There are going to be mistakes. There's going to be problems. And having the staff know that that's okay. We're not going to hit perfect, but we have plans in place to deal with if there is a problem. And this is from the management level. You touched on this, even for being 80,000 voters, not trying to do everything myself. And for those individuals, especially I've been here long enough, I can see that they're getting ready to make a mistake, but I need to allow them to make it. Because if I go in and solve it for them, they don't learn anything. I can advise it, but especially for new managers, in some ways, one of the things you have to learn is the ability to allow your staff to make a mistake so that they learn from it. As long as it's not something that puts you on the front page of the news.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. And that's what you and I talked about this before. So I've got a general government side and election side. I am way more micromanaging with the election side. And the reason why is they put me on the front page, right?
Risk management, right?
If something goes wrong with accounts payable and payroll, it's probably not front page news, but so you manage differently that way. Yeah.
Man, it's limit. Talk about managing differently, like the post 2020 environment. Obviously, we talked a lot about the ascendancy of our communications responsibilities externally, internally, but I wonder how it's changed the way you guys approach management, right? I remember personally being quite hands-on in a lot of processes, and I can imagine after 2020, sort of creating like a buffer space so that I can always be a communicator and not get tied up in the work necessarily of doing the work, but also not getting tied up in the possibility of mistake or, ensuring that we got the best protocols in place. Like this is always going to be two people in this room, a D and an R, and I'm not going to be one of them because that just doesn't make sense from a risk management standpoint. What has changed in your offices since 2020 as you've adapted? And Carla, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, so we've had to do quite a bit just because we did have an internal threat in one of our counties, and so there was some laws that were changed for us here in Colorado. And so for me as a large county, I now no longer have access to everywhere in my building either. So that's been a dynamic change in how to manage an election, is because now I have to be escorted in some places, which is perfectly fine with me because we've always been kind of like a no loan zone area in elections. Even my staff, you can't be there by yourself. You've got to have another team member with you. But that's even more emphasized now because everything is recorded for us. We're underneath camera video surveillance every single minute we are here, and we have had Quora requests to get that. So people are wanting to look at that and double checking us. Like you said earlier, if somebody picks their nose, well, now you're going to be able to probably potentially be on the news.
I mean, think about it. Like you got to worry about your hair every day. Is my suit pressed?
You gotta be on your game every day now, as far as appearance goes, and you gotta be mindful of where you're scratching. So that's been just kind of a little bit of a fun thing that we've tried to, kind of emphasize to them, because that's burdensome to know that every move and everywhere you go in your office, you are under video surveillance, and that can be put out into the social media sphere. So again, just having those type of different managing aspects that have now come into play, be it a law change here in Colorado, or just with having to, again, make sure that, as Jamie was saying, we always during election time want to make sure that we're striving for perfection, but even now, so when it's off election time as well, because we need to be making sure that even when we're prepping, even before we invite all of our election judges in to take over our process and procedures, we're now making sure that we are still crossing every T, dotting every I, even during a downtime. When we're supposed to be able to kind of have a little bit of a moment to breathe, we're not having so many moments to breathe anymore. So that's type of a different manager change as well, is keeping that shift in that cultural change that now, okay, we've got to be on point 365 days a year now, not just during when we're having a live an election happening once ballots go live. So that's definitely been a shift and a change in managing elections, and kind of shifting and changing, how people are constantly reminded, people are watching 24/7.
It's tough, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, for old timers, there was a pace to elections, and you were sort of rode this roller coaster,
Mhm.
and you squeezed people for everything that they could give, during those 8 to 12 weeks around the election. And then there was some recognition that we're going to take the foot off the gas a little bit, let people sort of recover. And that recovery period just doesn't exist anymore. The intensity sort of remains high, and we can adapt, right? Humans are amazing. We do. It takes some time. Nathan, talk to me a bit about your sort of adaptations.
Sure. Yeah. I kind of have a funny story I'll start with. You talked about having your hair ready and being dressed, for any sort of exposure. I believe it was in 2020. We had on election day, we get there about 5:30 in the morning. We left around 2:30, 3:30 in the next day, I guess you could say. after the election, I went home, slept for a little bit, came back ready to audit the election or canvass the election with my team. And the clerk says, hey, the news wants to speak, to you about a candidate, a losing candidate who was claiming that, there was some discrepancies in the reporting, and I was semi-homeless looking, So I said, I don't know how they're going to take this on the news. So I immediately drove all the way back home, put on a suit, combed my hair, came back and was ready for the interview. But it's good to be prepared, as was my point with that. But just to touch on a few things that Carly and Noah said about that buffer and creating things. Since 2020, we did a reorganization of our department because prior to that time frame, it was myself who oversee 7 different coordinators and their projects below them. They had supervisors and staff below them, and then temporary employees below them. And it was already difficult to manage all of those moving parts as it was. So since then, we did a reorganization, understanding that we can't just burn out staff. That burning out of staff was difficult. You could see it wearing them down because it was not, after the election's over, it's not over for us. We still have to deal with recounts, audits, and then in a general election cycle, prepare for the general if it's the primary, and then do the same thing all over again in the midst of holidays and everything else coming up that families have to overcome. We even have what's called a vacation freeze. About 2-3 months before an election, we say, hey, plan accordingly. Not that extenuating circumstances happen, we understand that, and we take that by a case-by-case situation, but don't plan your trip to Cabo, don't plan your family vacation during this time frame because it's just not possible. So we also tried to do 2 things. We created 2 managers under me, and we kind of split our department in half, where one manager manages half of the department and the other manager manages half of the other departments. And then, basically underneath them, we created a couple other additional staff members too to help with those projects. So we created additional staffing in our organizational chart, which really helped with that, because we can hire 100 temporary staff. They don't have the same buy-in, training, or understanding that a permanent staff member may have. And that was the argument I made with the county is, one permanent employee who's passionate and bought in on this can make up for 1 or 10 temporary employees. And you really have to understand that it cost, and I had to argue how much it cost us to hire these temporary employees, how much we're paying temporary employees, how much we're paying the vendor who's providing that service to us for that temporary employees from a budgetary standpoint. And basically equated to $350,000 savings actually hiring additional permanent employees.
Wow.
And so once we were able to argue or successfully argue that case, we got additional permanent employees. And I'm happy to say that even going forward during this next fiscal year, we're going to get 6 more additional employees to justify our staffing needs and cut back on some of those temporary employees. Because as Carly said, legislative session, every single legislative session, they change laws that then adds additional tasks for us, which requires more resources. And then you have 2 options. You burn out your staff. You're saying, okay, sorry, now we're extending the vacation freeze 2 months after the election, for various audits and reports and things that are due. Or, we cross-train, we hire more permanent employees and give people more of a flex time to take that time off for their mental health. Because we all know life happens. We're all humans, and health is a valid concern. So we never looked at it so refined as we do since 2020, and we really take that into account here, and we try to accommodate what we can when we can.
Yeah, it reminds me, like, and there's even a question in chat sort of about as we calendar everything out. You talked about vacation blackout days, right? The legislative changes, they can require new tech or new processes. And like, you got to figure out, some of them are required immediately and you just figure out how to pigeonhole those things in. Other ones, like, you may be instituting a new technology or upgrading a server set, but you put a blackout freeze on it based on the risk. Sometimes it's your county wanting to do it countywide and you're asking them not to do it for elections for a time period, and all those considerations come in and land on your decision-making CEO shoulders. Jamie, so tell me a bit about any of your adaptations post 2024 or 2020. I'm
Well,
sure
I
we'll
think,
have to adapt again after 24.
yeah, kind of to tie off that, scheduling became a huge thing we started looking at, which was we were burning out our staff, our full-time staff. And there was kind of a, that desk chicken, like staff be like, oh, I was here 12 hours. I was here 13 hours. And,
The
and then,
hero, right? Like I've got to be a hero.
yeah. And then, as clerk, I'd be like, I never left, which is not healthy, right? Right. I slept in my office. So we started adjusting, what are the ways that we can use temp staff and so forth and actually send our full staff home. And that was the first few times we did that, they really pushed back on it. A, they were losing some overtime, but B, they're like, but we're still open. And I'm like, yeah, but we've got the front desk covered. You go home because they need you ready for 2 weeks from now. So, we start voting 21 days prior, right? Maybe I don't need you the whole time that we're open these extra hours because we can cover it. You go home. And they hated not being here, but we started scheduling and really paying attention to what we were doing to the full-time staff. Or even like my warehouse coordinator, I started bringing in people just to help him unload machines and get them ready to get them charged and so forth. It cut down on his time, but paying that extra, I think, was huge for him. And it also communicated to him, hey, I see that you need help. Then the big thing, as you know, I made the decision during COVID, we split elections. We operated out of this old courthouse and we used an old Sears store. And I realized elections needed to not return to the old courthouse space wise. So we actually built an election office, moved our warehouse into the same office. At that time, it wasn't near us. So I now have an elections office and then my general government office is still at the courthouse. So that's been a change for me as a manager because I now have, and Nathan's probably used to this and Carly might have satellites. I now have staff at different locations that I'm managing. And especially during elections, I need to remind myself, hey, I need to go to the courthouse and remind them that I still exist. I'm still the boss, and so that's been probably a big change for me, has just been managing 2 separate locations, which we hadn't had before.
Yeah. It's so interesting as every time you say these buzz phrases, like popping in my mind about fundraising and how the challenges require investments. And it seems to me that the 3 of you have had fairly good success. I mean, Carly, your incredible growth, 400, 500% over like a decade just brings in a tax base and like it makes it so you can have at least natural growth. Jamie, you've had it sounds like a favorable like environment for investing in election security. Nathan, it sounds like, I mean, you were successfully able to get those positions in, but that's great, like fundraising to meet your organizational needs. I also appreciate how much you guys think about your staff's like health and safety. I do hope you recognize you're taking care of yourselves as well, because if the captain of the ship goes down, that's tough. So as we get towards wrapping here, I wanted to know, like, what would be your word of advice to maybe some newer folks in the business as we're going into 2024. And I don't know who wants to take that one first. I should have queued it up in a way that let you guys think about your sage wisdom. But Jamie, I'm gonna hit you first on that. Then we'll go to Carly, give Nathan the most time to construct like the greatest advice ever heard.
Thanks for the pressure.
No pressure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It evens out, right? You get to be third. Like,
Yeah, that's something that we've dealt with. I know that I think everybody else is too. I mean, 40% of the clerks in Kansas have left over the past few years. We have a lot of brand new clerks. Of my staff of 5, one other person has run a presidential. I've had turnover there also. I think the big thing is this is just a season. We'll survive, right? I mean, I remember going through the 2008 election going, I will never deal with another election like that. That was intense. That was crazy. Now I look at 2008 and I'm like, that was cute. compared to what we've dealt with. But we made it. I mean, 2020, I remember in the spring of 2020 being on the phone with so many of my peers going, how are we going to do this? Elections is such a tactile, person-based thing, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. There's no way we're going to do it. We not only did it, most of us had the largest
it right.
turnout we've ever had, and we pulled it off. And so when you're in the middle of it, you think you never will get out of it, but you will. And you'll move on to the next thing, and you're going to be okay. And also remind yourself, this isn't fully life. You know, I have kids that remind me that there's more to this, but it is just a season, and you're going to be okay. And the last thing is real quick is, for all of those voices that are yelling you, there are thousands of voices that are showing up, voting. They're happy with their experience. They're thrilled with the job your office is doing. You're hearing just this small percentage, but they're the ones that live in your head. Also hear the voices that you're not hearing that are telling you you're doing a good job.
That's great. See, you did Churchill, right? What did he say? If you're going through hell, just keep going.
Well, that
You
well, that
brought
comes
Nixon
from-
in with the silent majority.
Well, my spouse always say, she'll call, she'll be like, hey, how did election morning go? And I'm like, oh, this one polling place, it was a disaster. And so the whole election was a disaster. She's like, yeah, but you had like 50 others that opened, right? And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that's true. Right.
All right, Carly.
Yeah, to go off of what Jamie's saying, I'm definitely going to completely echo and support what he says. But another thing is you do have some of us that have been through this multiple times. This is my 6th presidential election. We may all run elections differently in our own states and everything, but at the end of the day, it's all kind of basically the same. We are providing a service to the people who want to have their voice heard, and I would say make sure that you reach out to your veterans in your own state. We've been there, we've done it, we've felt all the emotions, we've felt the physical pain, we felt the tiredness. We can absolutely resonate with you. So don't ever feel like you're isolated or alone. If you're, 2004 was my first election, and it happened to be a presidential. So I know what it's like to be new in a presidential year with all the nuances, with all the noise. I mean, every presidential always has something. There's just no way for us to really fully describe it. But at the end of the day, connect with the people that you can. Make sure that you are calling your veterans in your state, calling other states' veterans. You are more than welcome to look me up on anything. And I'm literally, during election time, I sleep with my phones, both of them, both my personal and my county. And you can reach me at any point in time, because it is really important that, like Jamie is saying, you will get through it. It is challenging. You're going to have those moments of self-doubt. If you don't, it's interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I was listening to a book online, and it was saying, if you don't have that kind of like faker feel, then you're not doing it right. If you don't feel like you're an imposter, that imposter syndrome, if you kind of don't have that, you might not actually doing it correctly. So just remember that if you feel like you're struggling, there are people who have been there, done that, and are absolutely willing to have a conversation with you. I know that one of the greatest things when I go to, even the Colorado conference or a national conference, one of the best things is just being able to kind of walk through and tell kind of our war stories. It is kind of the best therapy, because there really is nobody that can understand what we go through except for your fellow people who work in elections. There's no other industry like it. And so make sure that you are reaching out. Don't feel like you're alone. We're all here to be successful. Whenever I hear another person in another state across this nation going through something, know that I feel you, and it breaks my heart, and I want to help you out in any way that you possibly can. We're all going to stumble. We all have made mistakes. I've definitely not been perfect in my 20 years in elections, but it is definitely something that I greatly appreciate. The friendships that I have developed, with Noah, we met back at election center classes way back in the day. And some of the people and the best people I've ever met and built relationships with are my fellow elections people. And I would absolutely I can't emphasize it enough. Reach out to us, talk to us, and we are right there with you. You don't have to bang your head up against the wall by yourself. I can join you.
So true. That community, right? Rely on your community, your network. All right, Nathan.
All right, let's see if I can follow those.
And
two.
I do
They're
want to
both very
say
good.
that artwork behind you has gotten a couple call outs in the chat. So you win the room raider, I think.
So I recently had a manager who worked in elections for 28 years, and he decided to call it quits in January. He just said he wasn't in it for the ride for 2024, which I understood. He's been through quite a lot, and his kids are having grandkids now, or he has grandkids, I mean, and his mom is getting older. So he wanted to focus on that, completely understand. But one of the things that he left before, what he left with me before he left was that if he had to do one thing all over again, is he wished he would have took more time to spend with his family and his kids. And I understand sometimes in elections we get very busy. Sometimes we're here in an inordinate amount of time. But to take that opportunity just to focus on your family at home, that's going to be the most rewarding thing. What we do is very rewarding, and I love my job. But family is the most important thing. When you go home at the end of the day, you want to be a support function to them, and they're beneficial for your mental health as well, as they need you. The second aspect of that is your second family. We're here in an ordinary amount of time with work, and they become like family. I mean, we're here an extreme amount of time, a lot of pressure, a lot of services that we do good for, and so take care of them. One thing that when I came into elections, I came in kind of more rigid because I came from the private sector. If you didn't perform, you're out of there. I looked at gross margin, return on investments. If somebody was not providing me the services they need, they were gone. When I came in here, I had to change my mentality on that. I had to really think about it. Jamie mentioned it earlier, humbling yourself. One thing, I was overwhelmed. I didn't know everything that was coming in. And then I realized after diving in how passionate everybody in elections is, how much they care about the good that they do here, and rewarding them, fighting for them, supporting them whenever you can, shouting them out to anybody that can do it. I understand there's not a lot of intrinsic value here to what we do. Nobody's in here to get rich, these jobs. I get it. And so we need to highlight how much they care about this, how much passion they have for this, and do whatever you can to support them. And it means a lot. And I feel like that'll carry over to making your job a lot easier as a CEO. One thing that you guys both mentioned, I know I'm not the smartest individual, and I see all my staff, they come up with ideas and they come up with projects that just completely went over my head until I finally realized, there's a lot of individuals here that are successful in what we do and making this department a success. And I need to highlight that, acknowledge that, humble myself, and realize that. And like I said, take care of them as a family, because they are your second family. And I'll leave with that.